Okay. Okay, go ahead and flip it. Okay. Sounds good. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to this March 3rd edition of our APS Equity Committee meeting. Those of you who are joining for the first time, this is a new committee of the board that's just getting started. And so we have a lot of work that we want to do and endeavor to do, as we move throughout this year. So the first thing I want to do is pivot immediately to the approval of our previous meeting minutes. Those are attached in the agenda. Wanted to ask if there are any objections to approving those meeting minutes. So if not, what we'll do is, and Mr. Penley, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe what we can do here is just ask for a motion to approve those minutes and get a second, and then we can take a vote as far as all those in favor can say aye and those nay and abstain. That's how I'd like to do it. Is that sound feasible to you, sir?
We did have a discussion at the board level about not taking votes.
Okay.
Our minutes and other committees. I'm not saying we can't do that, Dr. Hall.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Our minutes have been summary minutes from other committees. And about the only action that we've taken has been like second reading kind of thing. However, summary based minutes, I think you can do that because the minutes are just a reflection of the meeting that we had. So that being said, yes, I think you can do that, but I did want to bring back the reflection of the board meeting.
Sure.
I can't remember from, but.
So okay, so this is good housekeeping. So as we move forward, we'll have this figured out. So in your estimation, then, and I asked this question because you're the board parliamentarian here, so I wanted to ask this question as well. So are you okay with us just asking for any objections to the meeting minutes and then moving on in the agenda?
That's perfect.
Okay, so I'll ask the question: are there any objections to the meeting minutes that were posted from last meeting? Okay, there are no objections noted. So we'll move forward then in our agenda. So the next thing I'd like to do is, before we jump into our first discussion topic, first want to welcome Ms. Hughes, the principal from Bookdole High School. Wanted to welcome her to this committee. Ms. Hughes, if you want to just take a moment, and I think we all know you, but if you just want to take a moment, just maybe say a few things about yourself. We'd love to. Again, welcome. We'd love to hear about you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. You probably are used to me by now. Like, how does she have energy at the end of the day? Today, I don't know. I don't know. But my name is Nicole Hughes, as you know. Originally born and raised in Connecticut, went to all East Coast schools, and happily migrated to find a home in Akron, Ohio, 3 years ago. And so we've begun the exciting transformation work at Bookdole for grades 6 through 12. We like to say the best and the brightest go to Bookdole, and we definitely proved that in the city championship. And so for those of you who don't know, I am married. My husband is a regional vice president for Olympus Incorporated, and we have 2 children and 1 on the way, 1 due in June.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate your humility. You didn't rub it in our faces that you are a Yale graduate, as I recall, right? You said all East Coast schools. So you gotta rep the Yale, rep Ivy League whenever you can, because that's a hell of an accomplishment. So again, want to recognize that, and also say how glad we are to have that kind of talent in our school district. So again, welcome. And so then moving forward in our agenda, I wanted to sort of spend a few minutes talking about sort of meeting structure and sort of where we go from here. And so as some of you are aware, in our other board committee meetings, we have senior staff who act as the drivers of those meetings and really act as the facilitators, right? Sort of lead those in concert with our board chairs. And so, for example, Mr. Pendleton, runs finance. We also have Dr. McWilliams-Woods, who also leads, facilitates our I&P meeting. And so it only makes sense for us to sort of move to our expert in this space, Ms. Carla Chapman. And so as we move forward, Ms. Chapman is going to assume that role. She'll be facilitating these meetings, and so putting together the agendas. And so, I would ask that as she reaches out, just as you do for Mr. Pendleton and others, that she reaches out, that you give her your full cooperation, and as she's acting on behalf of the board. And then also wanted to also talk a little bit about sort of high level, sort of where we're going. And I'm not going to get all this right, and so I'm going to ask Ms. Chapman to jump in here at the end and kind of take us home, and then she can go ahead and facilitate the rest of the meeting. What we're really looking to do with this committee is to really understand and examine the work that is either underway or in development or in planning as it relates to equity, right? And so every department has equity related initiatives that they're maybe currently working on. And so we want to make sure that we're providing a venue and a platform, because really the goal is to provide, again, that platform and venue for those department heads, to be able to come and present what they're doing as it relates to equity, and to have this committee sort of act as sort of a sounding board, or I think the term that we used earlier, Ms. Chapman, was critical friends. At times,
yes.
and I like that phrase. And then I think also it's also, kind of part two is we also want to make sure that we're providing opportunity for folks at the building level to be able to present, not just at this committee, but also working to establish sort of a schedule and a cadence for both this committee as well as as well as our regular board meeting as well. And I referenced the opportunity for buildings to present is because I know, to Mr. Alexander's point, we had talked about having the opportunity for us to hear about what we're doing that is directly impacting students, right? And a lot of these things can happen in parallel and don't have to happen consecutively. So anyway, and as that work, the other part is as we move this work forward and we have that schedule and cadence and groups are presenting, of course, the goal is for it to connect back to our APS advanced document and to tie into, and to ultimately tie back to our district focus as a whole. So having said that, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to ask Ms. Chapman to jump in and kind of add and fill in the gaps of anything, things that maybe I didn't talk about or miss. And then I'm going to ask Ms. Chapman to go ahead and move forward in facilitating our meeting today.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Hall. I think you summarized it quite well. Again, senior staff will know that we are on a regular schedule to present updates to the board on work that is taking place within our departments. I would like to use that same format to have department heads or their staff who are leading equity initiatives come before the committee. I have called them, with Dr. Hall, critical friends. These are people who support the work, but who will also ask questions and have us consider our thinking, maybe identify new opportunities and ways to support. And so coming soon, we'll begin to develop a schedule. Dr. James, in our last meeting, shared that he wanted to start the work with human resources, and in discussions with him and Kathy McVeigh and her team, we've decided that HR would be the first group to come before this committee with those updates. That doesn't mean that in between your time before the equity committee, there won't be opportunities to share with me, to work across departments. One of the good things about this committee is that it is interdisciplinary. And so to have folks come to share their information, I think lends itself to the opportunity to hear and to get feedback that may not have been considered by folks through a different lens, perhaps finance. We always look for Ryan for solutions, right? But I also think that as we consider what type of systemic solutions are required to address systemic issues, that an interdisciplinary body of people who have various kinds of expertise really are situated well to have those kinds of dialogue. So we have before us here today. And then at the board level, I just want to say, Dr. Hall, Mr. Alexander, Dr. Akbar, Mrs. McKittrick, as you look at policies and how to expand those to allow for various levels of support that we might learn might be required. And then, of course, the superintendent working hand in hand with all of his senior staff to ensure that we are all aligned to ultimately what is the Advanced APS 3 and 3 goals. So tying our work back to Advanced APS always when we're presenting and providing these updates. And we talked about it could also be building level programs. It could be principals who come before us with strategies, with ideas, with new programs that they have been working on within their buildings that they might want to share with us. Very similar to how we bring principals right now on special projects before the board. So does that make sense to everybody? Am I thinking okay?
I think it does, Ms. Chapman, too. If I could just add one more thing, it's important as you're moving the work forward as well. And Ms. Chapman and I we're discussing this offline too. That I'm a firm believer that everything is measurable. And so I think it's important in this space, especially in this space, to always. So the questions that I'm going to ask a lot are going to be around really two things. How are we measuring progress? So what are the metrics or KPIs that we're using to to really kind of determine whether or not we're making progress on a given initiative, and how do we know whether or not what does success look like? And then also I think kind of the other thing that's very important here is timelines, right? So wanting to understand, okay, in what timeline are we working to accomplish things in, right? That does not mean that if you present a timeline that come hell or high water, you have to meet that timeline, right? Because again, we're all wearing multiple hats and things are, and they're competing, competing interests. But it just means that the timelines act as a guide, and of course, if something happens and we need to extend that, that's fine too. But again, it's one of the things we're going into it. Want to understand two things really. Again, measurables and timelines. So as you sort of move forward in these conversations and with other departments and principals but at the equity level, that's where I'll be coming from a lot of the times, is want to understand, again, measurables and timelines. So, Ms. Chapman, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay. And Dr. Hall, finally, I think we landed on monthly meetings and more if needed in between. So I wanted everybody to know that. So you'll be getting that schedule soon as we map out those meetings and the presentation schedule. And so on the superintendent's recommendation, we have with us Kathy McVeigh from our Human Resources Office, who are going to provide some updates on equity strategies taking place within that department. Kathy?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I did put together a few slides that I wanted to share. Is everyone able to see the?
Yes.
Slide okay, it says Advanced APS.
Yeah.
Priorities in 3 years. So as we were talking with the Advanced APS, the 3 priorities in 3 years, we're going to provide you with a brief update from Human Resources on our work in this area. All of it, of course, with a lens towards our district focus and the foundation of providing skilled employees to the district. So today's agenda, the 4th areas that I'm going to briefly discuss are is AREL, our Alternative Resident Educator Licensure Program. Our progress so far in the employee resource groups, a little bit of discussion on the equity audit that we're going to be doing, and then the new positions that we've created for the district to help us support the work that we're doing. So for the Alternative Resident Educator Program, and as we've presented previously in a board meeting, is the human capital grant that we've worked on over the last year. That grant was in the amount of $50,000. It was a 1-year grant. It did get extended because of COVID, fortunately, so that we could continue to expend the money in that grant. The goal of it was to, of course, diversify our educator workforce. And some of what we did with that was a focus on a grow your own program, where we worked with and supported current employees in the district by providing assistance with tuition reimbursement or tuition discounts, mentoring of the employees, assistance with the prep courses so that they could move forward to get their educator license. We worked with 5 or 6 individuals in this program this year who were substitute teachers and educational assistants. Down the road, our goal is to work with APS students as well. We did have 2 employees that recently completed the program, so we were really excited about that. And actually, the 2 were approved at the last board meeting for teaching positions in the district. And the 3rd individual is very close to completing the program and will probably be coming before you in the next board meeting or 2 to be approved to be hired. Part of the work also is a continued expansion of that program. We have recently applied for another grant to help us continue with this work that's also being provided by ODE, and that grant is supposed to be in the amount of $75,000. So we're hoping to be able to get that here in the near future. I think there's a decision supposed to be made on that sometime towards the end of this month on whether or not we're going to get that grant. So some of the things we want to do to continue to expand that would be having with the candidates that are in the program, having monthly meetings with them, additional trainings with them, training them on OTES, the teacher evaluation system is what that is and what that's all about, additional professional development to provide for people too, because in all these cases, they're individuals who have not previously gone through an educational program at a college or university. So they don't know what to expect as far as like lesson planning or classroom management or what is a teacher evaluation and how does that work and how are you measured for everything that you're doing as a teacher. So we think that that's something that would be really helpful to be able to provide for the employees that go through that program. Some of them have no idea what to expect on the assessments, the state assessments that they have to take through ODE in order to become licensed. And so those are some of the things that we have already helped people with and plan to continue to do. The other thing, as you know, that we've been working on, and Carla and Erica Glover have worked a lot on this with the development of the employee resource groups. We started off by sending out a survey to employees in the district regarding their interest in employee resource groups, and if they were interested in what type, and then finding out what types of resource groups are they interested in. We had approximately 160 employees who indicated a very strong interest in developing employee resource groups. So there are some steering committees that have been developed and are continuing to be developed for people to just kind of get this thing running and off the ground on what groups are we going to set up and how are they going to, what are they going to do as far as community work, meeting within the district to move the work forward. And so 2 groups that are being worked on and created now are a group for the AREL candidates through the alternative licensure program. They'll have their own resource group to work together and with each other. And then an LGBT group that is also in the process of being developed. And so that work will just continue over this next year as we create those groups. The other thing that we're looking at and working on is the district-wide equity audit. Carla and Deborah Folk and I have been discussing it, working on it, and working with Jim Leonard in our purchasing office to put together the design of the RFQ that is going to be going out. We broke it down into 3 major groups from all the information that we had and from the equity policy. One of them, of course, being human resources, and then the 3 big areas to address within human resources is our recruitment and retention, practices, and then our job design, classification, and compensation, and then benefits and work-life integration and flexibility. The other large area we looked at was the community relations, that will look at issues related to community, to government relations, social responsibility, and then family and community engagement. And then the other main group is going to be the business affairs group, which will cover supplier diversity and products and services. So we've been working on that RFQ, and our goal is to get that finalized here sometime by the end of the month and get that out. We did look at timelines on that to get this done. So we figured that from March through August would be the time frame for it to be done and set up, and then hopefully having results by October 1st. It's there's some lofty goals there, because I do think it will take some time to get the audit done, and it may take longer than that. It may be that we just focus on one particular area under each of those three groups, and then continue to move on from there as we work through the process. And the new positions that we've developed in the district to help us move forward with the work is the Chief Diversity Officer position that is referenced in the racial equity policy. That job description has been completed and is going to be presented to the board for approval at this Monday's board meeting. We also recently obtained the board's approval for a learning specialist for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also a family and community engagement manager position that will work out of Carla's office. Those positions were posted. We've interviewed for those, and we're in the process of finalizing the selections for those two positions. So that's what I have in a nutshell for quickly for today. So we'll open it up for any comments or questions.
Kathy, I just wanted to add a couple of comments on the ERG. There are 3 emergent groups. So there's the AREL LGBTQ group, and also the Educators for Social Justice group that is forming with leaders in place and now pursuing recruitment. And the equity audit work that we are all engaged in now really is a combination of the Ohio Department of Education's comprehensive equity analysis tool and the Greater Akron Chamber's adoption of the Greater Cleveland Partnership equity tool. And so what we did was merge those two guideline documents to come up with those categories for the equity audit. And then finally, the AREL, because I know you're going to ask, Dr. Hall, there are some measurables associated with the AREL, which is 5 AREL candidates moving into full-time teacher positions each year. And there are some challenges with that Kathy can speak to that may allow for that to extend longer, or may require that it go longer than 1 year, but that's the goal.
Yep. This year was a perfect example of, COVID delayed and just delayed everything, and it delayed, testing couldn't be done. ODE even, extended the time frame for when teachers had to renew their licenses if they were up for renewal this year because of COVID, so that they could have additional time to take any coursework and professional development that they needed to do to get their licenses renewed. So it was the same thing with this group of people, and so sometimes people do get off track because life happens with people, and so we just, we just continue to move people forward and get over that hurdle, and so that we can help them, or they may need some additional supports along the way that in order for us to help them so that they can get their license, and that may delay things sometimes.
So I've got some questions, but I want to, but I always ask questions. So I want to defer to the group first. I think Dr. Akbar's got a question.
Yes, I know we've talked about this before, and I might have missed it today. So if I did, or if you can just repeat it, I'm sorry if I missed it. But you know, we talked about moving away from ventures and process and all the problems associated with that. Where are we on coming up with a new screening process
That,
use from our process?
yeah, it's my hope that we determine that through the equity audit process. My goal is that they would give us some recommendations for alternative interview questions or process if instead of ventures. Because that's what they will do. They will come in and they will take a look at our current practices and processes, and they will make recommendations to us.
I'm just wondering, I understand that part. I'm wondering if there's a something that could be put in place potentially, because we already know there's equity challenges with that program. If we continue to use it, it's going to take a few months, maybe half a year to actually do. We can probably eliminate that from our process and come up with a temporary process, just so that we're eliminating that from our that barrier from hiring, from the hiring process.
It is an interview process that we are already, not to say that we don't. I hear what you're saying, Dr. Akbar, but I wouldn't suggest changing midstream for interviews that are already taking place for next year. And so we figured time-wise that with this audit, if a recommendation is made for a new interview set of questions, that we would then begin to implement those for the following year, just for consistency's sake. But we also have other methods in place where we do move diverse candidates forward in interviews. But we can have further discussion about that.
We should, because it's I know a year ago we brought this up. It's been a discussion for a whole year, and so I would hate to continue to use that a whole new crop of staff this year, since we've kind of known about this for a while, the issue. So I'm just wondering if there's something that be put in place temporarily to eliminate that.
Okay, we will look into that. And again, there's the screening interview. We do have checks and balances in place to ensure that we are making sure that we are interviewing diverse candidates, because it's minority recruitment has been a goal of ours for a number of years, and we have increased our numbers. And our goal is to continue to increase those numbers by putting some of the other things in place that we've been talking about, like our Grow Our Own program and things like that.
I see Ms. Hughes has raised a hand.
Yes, and my questions are more clarifying. And forgive me for being new, and perhaps this has already been discussed. But can you clarify for me if the phase of the current phase of the equity audit was more of an internal self-assessment, and then the department is looking forward to an external audit that will provide additional information, or are we just waiting for an external audit?
Nicole, this is an external audit process that will go out for bid. Organizations that have that particular area of expertise in business affairs, human resources, and community relations. We did conduct kind of our own personal internal assessment by department with various people that we sampled from within these departments to contribute to that, but it's very subjective too, right? Based on one's lens and experience. So we do, the superintendent has asked that we look for folks who have independent auditing credentials.
Okay, so you might
to take a look at our practices.
You might have then answered my second question, and forgive me for having very much of a school-centered, data-driven mindset. So in the schools, we have our students take a diagnostic or a pre-assessment, and we do use that early data to drive our short-term, you guys call them KPIs, and we call them our 90-day plan goals. And so I was just wondering if human resources had already identified some short-term KPIs that were placed on a current timeline based on that data. And if that were the case, was that data that was going to be shared? But it seems as if right now it's probably internal or subjective data. Is that correct, Carla?
Mm-hmm. But I think that there are ongoing kind of dialogue and discussions. And Kathy, you can speak more to this. Erica and I talk often about processes and practice. And I know, Kathy, you have an internal team. If you want to speak to how you guys are coming together to have those conversations as well.
Yes, we often meet and discuss, our practices and procedures to make sure that we're moving forward, tracking our interviews, the number of interviews that we do, the number of our number of hires that we have every year, so that we have that data to look at, and we're tracking the diversity all across the district as well. I kind of got lost in what exactly your question was, Nicole. So you might have to explain a little bit more. But
I think I was wondering what short-term or intermediate data was driving your current set of decisions, and then wondering how you expect your decision data to be triangulated over time. And again, I have a school lens, so I think of it as, what was your pre-assessment data? How did you respond? As you keep collecting data throughout this process, how are you adjusting your response? And how does that ultimately align to what you hope to see on the equity audit that's now in your control versus what you may be surprised by with the equity audit that won't be in your control?
I think one of the things with the equity audit too, I think would be, when they take a look at, for example, what our interview questions, for example, what is it about the question or the answers that we're looking for that that might be viewed as potentially racially biased that we may not see. And I know Carla and I've had many, or not Carla, Erica and I've had many conversations about what about this question could be viewed by a diverse candidate different than what I would look at it, the answer that I would give on a question. And so we've had a lot of those questions. We've had a lot of conversations following all of the diversity training that we're currently doing in the district. Following those, we've had our own departmental debrief from those meetings and what we can take away and carry from that. But we are constantly looking at, how many people did we hire last year or the year before? What was the number of diverse candidates that we hired? And what can we do to increase our diverse candidates even coming to the district to begin with to apply? Because one of our huge challenges is that the candidates just aren't there. And every district across the United States, and with us in Ohio, are all competing for the same candidates and trying to get people into their districts. So it's a nationwide problem for districts that then that's why we started looking at the grow our own program through the human capital grant, so that we could look at developing our own employees so that they could be trained and developed to become teachers for our district.
And Nicole and Kathy, if it's okay with you, I can jump in a little on kind of the self-assessment, which was taken by an individual within the Human Resources Office. But as a group back in 17 or 18, we came together, some school improvement folks, human resources staff, myself, and maybe a couple of others to look at our practices. And one of the things that we knew we needed more focus on and to pay more attention to was kind of the comprehensive data analysis, right, within human resources that would look at multiple sources so that we could identify needs based on that information. We knew that there was a need to look at comprehensively how we're attracting, recruiting, retaining, and supporting staff, how we use millennials in focus group discussions to better understand their professional goals. And I'm reading right from the list that we all kind of debriefed on a few years ago. Establishing partnerships with colleges and universities was a goal. Kathy already mentioned the prioritizing and hiring of a diverse workforce. And so those were some of the things we identified as a team when we looked at the Ohio Department of Education's comprehensive equity analysis tool. And so it was more process oriented and I would say more subjective than what we are going for now.
Yeah. So if I can, so thank you for that. I just had a couple questions as well. So first, Ms. McVeigh, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. And I also want to say I appreciate that you didn't have 30 slides that took up the entire meeting and then left no time for questions at the end. So I'm thankful that we had a nice, succinct presentation that left plenty of time to kind of have this kind of robust discussion, right? I mean, so it's probably one of the reasons why we put this committee together is to have these kinds of conversations, right? And none of this is about weaponizing data or finger pointing, right? It's about kind of, having those, those constructive conversations around how do we identify and process and ultimately move together in a way that is hopefully consensus driven, right? That we all kind of get sort of what the issues are and kind of, and come together. Having said that, I just had a question, I actually had several. And so I'll ask two questions and then I'll stop and I'll go back to the group to see if they've got any questions, because I don't want to hog the rest of the time. But my first question was, with respect to Ms. Hughes' question, and Ms. McVeigh, I apologize, I may have missed this in your answer earlier. But did you say that we had done an internal assessment already that had determined that this was an area of opportunity for us?
We have, well, I don't know if I would call it like an assessment, but I would say we've had many meetings within my department with my managers to discuss everything about the equity that we've all been talking about for the last several months. And like I indicated, after we have, all of senior staff has a monthly diversity training series that we're doing. And I included my staff in that. so that we could have those discussions and look for those opportunities. And so we've had those debriefs, and we've looked at what we're looking at, what we're doing, and we're talking about what we're doing. We're looking forward to doing the audit so that we can get the feedback that we're looking for on how can we, improve our interview process. How can we take a look at our job descriptions, for example, to make sure that they're not biased in any way to maybe, and that's probably going to involve, rewriting some job descriptions. And so we look at it as a way of expanding upon the work that we have already been doing. So, because remember, we have been, we're members of the camera organization up in Cleveland that we sat on that waiting list for several years to get on that group that does a lot of work with minority recruitment, going to historically Black colleges and universities that we've done several years ago, but haven't done recently. So we're talking about, do we need to go back and do that again to see if we have any better success with that? We've talked about looking out of state. Again, that was something that was done a number of years ago that we have not done recently. Going through different organizations just to be, make ourselves more marketable. In the past, we've done things like advertisements within. I'm trying to think of the name of the magazine. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it was a nationwide recruitment for minority recruitment that we ran advertisements in that. And we still do that.
So to that point then.
Sorry?
Yeah, so to that point then, to your point, it doesn't sound like there was ever any sort of formalized assessment of our current interviewing tools, is what it sounds like you're saying. And the reason why I asked that question, because I noticed that when we were talking about the external vendor, I noticed that you said that that you used the word if. So if the vendor were determined that there were inequities in our interview questions and hiring process, then we would then move to act. And so I'm trying to reconcile that with Dr. Akbar's question, which was, and Dr. Akbar, please correct me if I get this wrong, but I think you were sort of asking, well, we know that we've got concerns and issues with our current process. Why would we not move to put in place an interim process that maybe is more equitable in the interim? But it sounds like from what you're saying is that we haven't necessarily done an assessment of the current interview questions to have made a determination that it is in fact that equity is in fact an issue. So those are the positions that I'm trying to reconcile. And just, if you'd like to comment, just want to give you that opportunity to comment.
Yeah, to be honest, I have not had an assessment done of the ventures interview questions. That in my mind, that was going to be done through the audit that we're going to be doing.
Gotcha. Roger that. Yeah. Okay, Roger. Roger that. I appreciate that. Okay, because I was trying to reconcile the two. Ms. McKittrick, just raise your hand, Ms. McKittrick.
Thank you. So you talk about the ventures assessment tool. Can you walk us through a little bit what kinds of questions are asked and what kinds of answers you're looking for?
The questions that are asked with the ventures interview are questions that are supposed to get at the candidates' drive, their reason for wanting to be a teacher. So the questions will get at, are you that person that you're getting into teaching, or you want to be a teacher because you care about children, you want to see them grow, you want to see them develop, that you want to see them succeed, as opposed to on the opposite end of the spectrum, the teacher that that's in it because you have great benefits and I get my summers off and I get my winter break off. And I quite honestly have had people answer questions to that effect, like, why do you want to work here? Well, because I know you guys have good benefits. I've actually had that happen. And so the questions are developed towards, are you that person that that because you want to help kids and you want to see them grow and develop. That you're child-centered and that you're not self-centered.
And are these questions asked in an interview, or are they written, and are they open-ended questions, or are they given choices? How are the answers?
They are asked in a face-to-face interview.
Okay.
Right now it's been virtual, of course, because of the pandemic, but in general, it's a face-to-face interview.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions that anybody may have? I see two hands. I'm not sure who was in first. Mr. Alexander, I think you may have been in by a hair over Dr. Akbar. You want to jump in first?
Okay. Yeah, and I'm trying to listen to what was being said too, and trying to reconcile. And I was wondering, have we maybe even reached out to the National School Board Association and Council of Urban Boards of Education, who may have some information on that, or have we reached out to OSBA, who could probably give some information up front as to what Dr. Akbar is saying? And they may not be able to give it to us in a timely manner to restructure what we want in a short period of time. So we may have to wait, but at the same time, that might be a good idea just to reach out and see what they have at this time. And it might be wise for us just to go ahead and wait until we get the audit done. And that way, once we get the audit completed, we'll know exactly what we need to do. And then we should move forward at ASAP.
Yeah, I can contact them, sure.
Dr. Akbar? And then Ms. McKittrick?
Yes, I won't belabor the point, but I do want to just emphasize the challenges with using ventures. So there's three major crux to the challenge, which I did share with the owner of ventures, and I never received a response. So that leads me to believe that the questions of the methodology is valid. The first question is it basically norms. It does a norming for pre-screening. So I think that's the other thing that I'm not sure if we've talked about, is the pre-screening that happens before the interview process, that basically kicks some people out of even being sent to principals or whoever the hiring manager is. And so that's part of the problem, is you're doing, I think it's a 26, if I'm remembering it correctly, 26 questionnaire type of pre-screening, where a person completes it and basically says, you know, what their thoughts are. And it norms it based off a national set of data, which we know is going to invariably, be against some norms of cultural responsiveness to people who are not white. We just know that. We know that inherently because the norms are different. The other thing that I think is important is that the way in which it discusses values, and so the question is, whose values align with? Does it align with? And I would venture to say those values, based off what I saw from the methodology, is based off a norming system and not on a culturally responsive. And so there's going to be challenges there when you think of diverse candidates. If you don't hold middle-class white ideologies about teaching, then you won't get through to actually be interviewed. And so that's a challenge that we have. Why I'm harping on this, because when we think about equity gaps, this is one of the largest gaps we have when it comes to hiring, to get candidates to the tables of principals and hiring managers if we are pre-screening them inequitable screening system. And this is the only reason why I can't let it go, because we get too many candidates who fall through the cracks because they don't make it through that pre-screening.
Okay.
That's part of what I was going to ask. because the first example you gave of a question, that would be a pretty easy one to score, right? But the questions that are perhaps more nuanced, the value system that they're being held up against, if it's a white middle class value system, then like Dr. Akbar said, it's going to eliminate candidates from the very beginning because it's not taking into account cultural differences. So that's my concern as well.
Mr. Alexander and then Ms. Hughes.
No, Ms. Hughes is next. I already went. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
So I think that Dr. Akbar and Ms. McKittrick said it perfectly, but I did want to reiterate. So my first question was more about the continuous improvement process that the central office is using, because we already know the process that the schools are using. My second question was actually going to be, how does the work in human resources align to the work in the schools? And Dr. Akbar, you said it perfectly when you used the example of culturally responsive teaching and learning. I can give an example because I do have the specialty opportunity to add a little bit different elements to my interview process. And we found that in some of our culturally responsive teaching case studies, some candidates have opted out of Booktel or of culturally responsive pedagogy once they understand the difference between an inner city school and an outer inner city school. And so that again goes to the question of how is HR aligned with the work and the needs specifically in the schools. And perhaps as we are moving forward in this equity audit process, to consider a sample of building principals as a focus group that can provide constant feedback and not just within the equity audit that happens maybe once a year or biannually, but on a regular process, perhaps even quarterly.
I like your idea, Nicole, the focus groups. I mean, we do now when we move candidates forward to the building level, to the principals and the staff at the building that are on the committee, on the interview committee, do have opportunity and do create their own interview questions that align to the culture and what's going on in their each individual buildings. That then allows that candidate, like you say, in some cases, withdraw from being considered because it's not quite what they were looking for. And so we do that, but we know that we need to bring in a new system. It was just, like I was mentioning earlier, through the equity audit, was our hope that we would ferret that out. But we can certainly, as Mr. Alexander said, contact OSBA too and see if they can help us out with something in the meanwhile, while we wait for the audit to happen.
I think my hand is raised. I can't tell. You can't see your own hand, can you?
Yeah, Ms. Chapman's hand is raised.
I think one of the things that I'm excited about, and I'm not going to put Karen Gijic on the spot, but I think the DEI learning specialist is a real opportunity to do that alignment work between buildings and central office departments. And that is, I think, Karen, you can certainly chime in. A key aspect of that work is to build that coherence across the district so that we're being informed at the central office by the buildings are being informed by teachers, central office informed by all.
I think you summarized it perfectly. You know, that it's our hope that role is cross-cutting and not just in teaching and learning, but really reaches between and across departments. So thank you.
Mr. Alexander?
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, yeah, it's still raised.
Is it? I'm sorry.
No worries. I just want to make sure that we didn't miss it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm just doing a quick time check. I know that we've got 5 minutes left. You all know I prefer military precision. We start on time, we end on time. That's how we show respect for people's time. So having said that, so in the last four or 5 minutes here, I wanted to ask. So there's been a lot of good commentary, and as I told Ms. Chapman, one of the things that makes me crazy, in some of my previous jobs, is to be in a meeting where there's great conversation, when there's no follow up, and there's somebody that's capturing the good ideas and ensuring that maybe there's movement there. So the question I had is, Ms. Hughes, mentioned the focus groups. I know Mr. Alexander talked about, the OSBA component. Ms. McVeigh, I want to ask you, like, are there items or activities that we can start to engage in the interim while we're waiting on the equity audit to take place and to complete? So, for example, Ms. Hughes' idea around some of the focus groups, to sort of, because I think the alignment piece is huge. I think it's an excellent point. So are there, in your opinion, Ms. McVeigh, are there things that we can do in the interim in concert with certain folks on this committee in the interim to address some of the concerns that have been raised today?
I think the focus groups that Nicole talked about is certainly something that we could start pretty quickly, and to involve a couple of people from my department to talk about our interview processes. We can stop using ventures here in the next week or so. I think we could quickly convene a team to figure out what we're going to do in the meanwhile. Like Mr. Alexander said, contacting OSBA, maybe some of our other partners to help us with that. Thinking maybe connecting with the ESC that we work with, getting some assistance from them with that.
What you said, ENC? What is
the
that?
ESC, the Educational Service Center, the Cuyahoga County Educational Service Center that we work with. There are many resources there that we could tap into to help us with this.
Gotcha.
And I think adding these kinds of things to the 90-day plan, right? The 90-day plan process is not lost on central office, Nicole. So I wanted you to know that we also have plans that we work from to monitor and hold ourselves accountable. So I think that those are the kinds of things too we can look at for holding ourselves accountable to the work that we wish to do.
Roger that. So having said that, then Ms. Chapman's going to ask, were you able to capture those 3 or 4 items that Ms. McVeigh just kind of ticked off as the things that we could kind of start to do in the interim? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Because I'd like to follow back up, and we can work with you, Ms. Chapman, Ms. McVeigh, to kind of figure out an appropriate time to follow back up on how that's going, and get more of a progress update. So I'll stop talking. Ms. Chapman, if you want to take us home.
So our next step will be to publish the schedule of meetings, ensure that you are all invited. Next up, and voluntarily so, is Student Services with Dan Rambler. And so we'll be hearing from his division next month. And if there are any questions in between time, please feel free to reach out. I'm reaching out to everyone as we continue this work, taking guidance from Superintendent James and Assistant Superintendent McWilliams-Woods and all of the other senior staff members as well. I have crowned myself persistent agitator more than a year or so ago, and I'm quite comfortable in that role. I have lots of friends, so that's helpful too. And I think that's it for me, Dr. Hall. If there's something else you want to say before we wrap it up, it is 5:30.
No, I think we can wrap. So again, Ms. Chapman, thank you for your engagement, and thanks for agreeing to sort of facilitate these meetings as we move forward. Want to thank again, special thanks to Ms. McVeigh. Again, I just want to say again, this was a really great conversation. It was very robust, and I liked Ms. Chapman as we move forward. I think it was nice to have a shorter presentation and more time to discuss. And so maybe we can, trigger that moving forward, where maybe it's 10 to 12 minute present, and then we save the balance of the time for discussion. So having said that, we're at 5:30. I will bid you all the best of evenings, and we'll talk with you again real soon.
Thank you.
All right, everyone have a good
Bye,
evening.
Right.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow, Deborah.
Okay, Carla, take care. Ice that knee.